Well, Céirigh, I don't want to waste too much time, and I won't waste too much time, but I have to totally endorse what Senator Mullen has said about guillotining this bill. I mean, it is disgraceful. It is completely disgraceful that it's been shoehorned through in the manner that it is. And what was the hurry? I'll tell you what the hurry was. Some idiot in government buildings said, we'll have a better chance of getting this through if we say it's going to be held on International Women's Day, the 8th of March. And what happened? That's what happened. You got stuck with that ridiculous notion that this will help the bill go through and we will be seen to be, in inverted commas, pro-woman and doing something on International Women's Day if we select that date for the vote in a referendum. Now, that was, as I said yesterday, a gimmick, but it's a crude little gimmick. And it's not the way that a constitution should be changed. It isn't. It's shameful, really, that that stunt was allowed to become a backstop in terms of time for considering change to our constitution. And the ludicrous thing is that the Commission, which is by law required to function in respect of referenda, indicated to the government that they needed this bill to be passed this evening and to go to the President so that Minister Dara O'Brien can fix the 8th of March as the date for it to be heard, and the Commission can carry out its statutory duties to inform the public and to do all the things it has to do as a matter of law. That's what this is all about. Shabby, silly, stupid, idiotic tactics. And it is the case, as Senator Mullen said, that I would love to have had the opportunity to look at the issues which Senator Clonan has raised in far greater detail, rather than have this thing flung at us and this House convened as a kind of a gesture. Because the timetable that we've been given doesn't permit of any amendment in this House. No matter what we did, it was always intended to just rush it through and use the whip and get it through.
To the amendment, well, I understand his frustration in relation.
I'm speaking to the circumstance in which this amendment is being pushed through. And I mean, I do have to protest about it, because I will be saying in public that you shoved it through for those particular reasons, in that particular way, that you curtailed discussion on it. I'll be saying it. And you can't deny it, because everything I have just said is the God's honest truth. Amen. That's why we are sitting here on Tuesday, and that's why this Commission has demanded that it be in its hands within 48 hours or 24 hours. Anyway, I've made my protest. I could have called more votes on the orders of business and all the rest of it to make the same point, but that would have chewed up the time that's available. The second thing I want to say is this, that this amendment that we are now considering has two functions. Number one, it amends Article 41(2). And secondly, it introduces an entirely new article called Article 42B. And just as Article 41 has An Teaglach, the family, as its heading, and Article 42A has children as its heading, we are now inserting not merely Article 42A, but a heading into our Constitution, care. So the provisions of the Irish Constitution that deal with care will be the provisions set out in Article 42B. And it's in that context that I want to echo everything that Senator Clonan said. We are providing, as a mature democracy, wording to deal with the whole question of care in a new Article 42B, in language which is patronising and demeaning, and we've heard that phrase used in respect of the existing Article 41 too, but patronising and demeaning for people who have disability and need care. This isn't a family provision because, as I said, it's taken out of the family chapter of the Constitution and it's put into the care chapter of the Constitution. And it says that the state recognises the provision of care by members of a family to one another by reason of the bonds that exist among them gives to society a support without which the common good cannot be achieved and shall strive to support such provision. So it's effectively saying that families have a particular duty because of the bonds they have between them, though we don't use the term duty, that's unfashionable now. But they give a support by reason of the bonds that exist among them. And of course, the phrase, the bonds that do exist among members of a family, small f, are ones of duty. That's what it is. It is duty. It's a different term. But they're saying that care is to be given by members of a family to one another by reason of the bonds that exist among them. And how can it be that we now reform our Constitution to provide a new chapter called care and say that it's all to do with what family members give to each other by virtue of the bonds that exist between family members? Where's the state's obligation in this? Where's the community's obligation in all of this? Where is the social responsibility for people who have disability to vindicate their rights? And Senator Clonan is talking about people with disability. And for him, this will be the only constitutional provision for people with disability. And it's being sold on that basis. It's a kind of a mishmash thing that it's being sold on the basis that this is where the state provides in its fundamental law for the whole issue of care. And it restricts care to that kind of care that's given by one member of a family to another by reason of their bonds of loyalty. Now, I don't think that the arguments Senator Clonan has advanced are met in any way by this particular few lines, because it doesn't even commit the state to much, to be honest. It doesn't commit the state to much. It says it will assist members of families who provide care to each other. And doesn't even say that it will assist them. It says it'll strive to do so. So it's virtually, I have to say, virtually unenforceable in any shape or form. You can't go down to court and say you're not striving hard enough, or you're giving too many funds to the Arts Council, you should be giving it to home care, or you're giving too much money to acute hospitals when home care needs more. Nobody can go down to the forecourts and say to a judge, tell the government to shift that money from A to B. You know, we have 20 million to waste on a referendum. Not even that can be appropriated for care by a High Court judge. So I entirely agree with Senator Clonan. This is the only provision in the Irish Constitution to deal with care, and it has no social dimension to it other than the family dimension. and it has no wider application other than the kind of care that family members give to each other. And, you know, Senator Clonan told us about his apprehension about what happens when he and his wife pass on, and their son will be dependent on the community for care. And he's told by a HSE person that won't his son have a sister. I mean, how bad is that? How bad is that? But that is the type of care that we're putting into our Constitution, family to family, and we're saying that is the sum total of the Constitution's provision for care. Now, that's where we're putting in this new chapter. But what we're taking out, I just want to say a few things about it. I accept that the gender-specific reference to mothers of children, Máthracha Cluine, is probably reflective of other days. I accept that. And if it had simply been Tish Mahori or Tishti, who could have argued with it? And who would have argued that it was, who would have argued that the life of parents in the home and I suppose to use the language carefully, the duties of mothers could be argued with if they refer to the duties of parents in the home. But we have now a sort of a rights-based culture where everybody believes in rights, and very few people like to even to use the term duty anymore, except to apply it to the state or to society in general. And, you know, the Constitution, as Senator Mullins says that the duties of parents are not just simply to care for their children, they're to, under Article 42, to develop their children's personalities, to educate them, to develop their social and moral formation. It's not just care, it's not just somebody coming in to care in the house like a professional childminder or something. This is much more substantial than that. But all I would say is that if we were really worried about removing something demeaning or allegedly demeaning to women from the language of Article 41(2), 3 words was all that was enough to change it. Parents and parents of children where they appear in the text. But I think that we are dealing with something more than that. We are dealing with virtue signalling, and we are saying that we reject the closed Catholic ethos of the 1930s, which did have so many negative consequences for so many people in terms of social policy. We have to remember that when we're talking about Máthracha Cluine, this was a society where the Catholic Church had 96% dominance, and it was telling every mother, poor or rich, that it was her duty to have as many children as she could. You know, I mean, and I'm talking about women in the slums of Henrietta Street and Dorset Street and the like. They were being lectured from the pulpit to keep producing children. And where their husbands were insufficiently involved in the home, those women had to leave tenements where the whole family was in one room and go out and act as char ladies and things like that, and do other work, leaving the eldest children in charge of the younger children. And in those days, it was considered that there was a great moral danger to children, especially poor children, who were left in those circumstances. And this guarantee that mothers wouldn't be forced out by economic necessity had a very different context. It wasn't aimed at the middle classes. It wasn't aimed at people who had career choices. It was aimed at people who had no choice. And I just want to say that, this document does not say anywhere that woman's place is in the home. It doesn't say it. And, one of the things that I find fascinating is that people ignore other bits of it. If we look at Article 45 of the Constitution, it obliges the state to direct its policy towards securing, and these are the words of the Constitution, that the citizens, all of whom, men and women equally, have the right to an adequate means of livelihood, may, through their occupations, find the means of making reasonable provision for their domestic needs. So anybody who says that this Constitution said women should not work, they ignore what's written in it, that men and women were equally guaranteed the right to make provision for themselves by their work. Sorry.
Without interruption, please. Without interruption, senators, please. Senator, please, without interruption.
Saying it's about women.
Sorry, senators, please. Sorry, Senator McDowell, please, to the chair.
Don't tell me to calm down.
Sorry, Senator, please.
Sorry, hang on.
No,
hang on.
sorry, Senator, do not interrupt the Senator.
It's a very gendered comment to make there now. All I said was that that is not about mothers, it's about women.
From speaking, the
And he
Senator
told
has
me
the
to calm
floor.
down.
You'll have your time in a few minutes.
I'm saying that anybody who says that this Constitution did not want women to work or to have occupations or to be able to earn their livelihoods is wrong. It never said anything of the sort. And people quote selectively from this document, but it has to be read as a whole. It was not the case that Ireland said that women should not work. Now, having said that, there certainly was, and I take Senator Higgins' point, there certainly was a general attitude that really men were more suited for work and women for domestic existence. Undoubtedly, that was a general attitude in the early 20th century. Undoubtedly, that was the case. And, but it wasn't just Ireland, I can tell you. People talk about the marriage ban in our civil service. It was rife right across the English-speaking world and the German-speaking world. Women were treated in that way. But this Constitution does not and was not the origin of the grossly unfair rule that women had to give up their jobs in the civil service once they married, even if in the most appalling cases they, for one reason or another, did not have children. They still, because they were married, had to get out. I mean, these were awful rules, but they were generalised across Europe. And I noted an article which referred to this subject that Senator Higgins referred to, and that was that women in 1927, that Kevin O'Higgins effectively told the Dáil that women really should be in the home rather than serving on juries. But there was the mother and father of a row about that. And this House objected to the removal of women from the role of jurors. And a compromise was ended up. Jenny Wise Power and somebody else, I've forgotten who the other senator was, but a compromise was worked out that women were free. They wouldn't be on it automatically, but that they were free to act as jurors if they wanted and to put their names on the jury roll. But it's interesting, you know, that Kevin O'Higgins's views were of the kind that Senator Higgins talked about. But there were women in this House who kicked up an almighty fuss about it and stopped him in his tracks and forced him to back down to an amendment. So, one other thing, when I was talking about women being forced by economic necessity to work outside the home, since everybody has taken to giving their own particular memories of their own earlier life in this respect, I remember that my own mother, who was a qualified architect but opted to work in our household only. One of the things that she got up to with a friend of hers who was also a qualified architect at the time was to become involved in a thing called the Civics Institute in Dublin. And the Civics Institute was a kind of a do-gooding philanthropic body, an NGO, if you like. And it ran creches in the city centre of Dublin for working mothers. I remember going to see them on occasion with my mother. And the strange thing was, and maybe Senator Mullen won't like me saying this, that they got a very cold shoulder from the Catholic Church.
The truth will set us free, Michael.
Because they weren't denominationally Catholic, because they were non-denominational creches for children.
It wasn't that they were helping the women work outside the home.
That's
a great relief to me. They were on the side of the angels.
The point I'm making is Ireland was a very different place. And Ireland was a very, very different place. So, I'm just saying that those who actually did something in the 1930s, 40s and 50s to assist women to work outside the home while giving them assistance in the care of their infant children, they ran into cold winds based on the most ridiculous of grounds that they weren't Catholic creches and that they were non-denominational, interdenominational creches, if you like. So that's all I want to say, really, but I do want to say those things, and I do want to say that the provision that we are supposed to be taking out of Article 41(2) was well-intentioned, pro-woman, and was not intended to force women to remain in the home. It merely obliged the state. And by the way, it's not a directive principle of social policy to be found in Article 45. It is a direct obligation, just as much as the provision of aid to education, to private education, is a direct obligation of the state in Article 42. The provision in this case found expression in things such as children's allowance, which was payable to the mother. It found expression also in the Murphy decision in 1980. The Supreme Court specifically looked at Article 41 and subsection 2 of it and specifically relied on the protection that women should not be obliged by economic necessity to work outside the home, to the neglect of their duty in the home, as part of its reasoning in forcing the state to introduce a pro-family tax regime. It isn't a dead letter. It wasn't a dead letter in 1980 when Francis and Mary Murphy relied on it in the Supreme Court successfully to stop themselves being taxed unfairly. We had a discussion on this morning about taxation. They relied on it successfully to do that. And I'll end on one last thing. If we get to the point where there is a legislative basis for working from home, the present wording of Article 41, subsection 2, would give a very strong argument to anybody who says that they were being forced by their employer, particularly by the state, to work in an office unreasonably when it imposed on them economic difficulty in looking after the children of a family. That's all I have to say.